So, a very important thing to consider as you start to think about the various things that you need to do to complete assignments or prepare for an essay is not only just completing the work, but actually considering a method for breaking down that work and managing the work in a specific way. So when you're looking for articles and you're looking for sources to read and consider when you're doing that, you have to consider your purpose. So many times, and in fact most times when you're in university, at least in your undergraduate courses, you want to take a good look at those assignments and you want to consider the outcomes of those assignments potentially as related rather to the outcomes of your course. So it's always a good idea to start with your course syllabus. Take a look at the course outcomes or expectations as written down, and if that's not very clearly written out, take a look at the topics for your course, because very often professors and instructors like for students to connect their assignments directly to the course topics. And so think about it in that way. Whatever you do in a course is going to benefit you for studying, for learning your content. And so they're not separate things that you need to complete. So going to class and completing assignments are very much interconnected. So it's really good to get a sense of what your course is all about if you haven't done that, and to revisit that every time you plan to begin planning to complete an assignment, whether it's an essay, whether it's an annotated bibliography, or it's a reflection. They should all be anchored in the expectations of your course. And so when you're reading, you might have an overall initial approach based on an objective or a purpose. And as you go to complete the smaller parts of an assignment, you might want to consider each time what your goal is when you're reading a specific piece of an article. It really depends, but always consider what your goal is each time. So a really good strategy for going through and reading the different parts of an article or even a textbook. This one is mainly set for textbooks, but it's a series of smaller strategies that make up an overall approach. And really, it has multiple steps. And when you're looking at reading something for use, for whatever use you have for it, you don't want to just start to read at the beginning and read all the way through, because it's very likely that you might lose your focus, you might forget your purpose, and initially your purposes are going to be figuring out how that content or how that text is organized. Once you have a better sense of how the text is organized, you are then able to move through and use that information in a much more efficient manner. So if you think about these following steps as some potential things that you can do to kind of adapt to the way or the format that text is organized, you might be more effective with actually using a piece of text. So the first thing you want to do is you want to consider taking a good survey of the text as a whole. So you may wish to, if it's a textbook, for example, go to the back of that textbook and look for the summary or the discussion part of the textbook. Usually it's about a paragraph or two. Sometimes the publishers, I find these days, are getting a little savvy and they're kind of organizing it in smaller pieces, or they're listing it in a question format. I really like the little simple paragraph or two. It really sets the context. It's a bit of a spoiler. You know it's coming then, but I like to think of it as one bookend, just to kind of know where you're going and where you're headed. When you have that overall kind of sense of what's happening in a textbook chapter, you can then be prepared, because you're making connections at that point. And the more primers you have, the more little bits of information that are acting as hints, so the more you're able to do that for yourself, the better prepared you are to make connections and increase your reading comprehension as you move through a piece of text. If you're, again, using a textbook, you might also want to go back to the beginning of your textbook, and we're still in the survey part, and you may wish to look at your reading objectives or your textbook chapter objectives. Usually, in the case of a professor or instructor that is using a textbook very closely, in those cases, they may tend to use those objectives themselves as teaching objectives. So you will quickly get a sense if you start to look at your outcomes and consider them before you go to class, you'll quickly get a sense of whether or not your professors are using those outcomes as well to teach you. The outcomes basically, they provide you with a focus. And so they might start with something like, in this chapter you will learn, or in this chapter you will see or read or understand. So it's really good for you to take a look at those before you read. And it's not that you want to look at all of them at once, but you can maybe pick a particular one or prioritize based on the most important one according to what's in your course syllabus. And then you can read to find out more about a very specific topic. Another way of approaching that while you're still surveying the chapter is to get used to how the text is organized. You might notice that there are headings and subheadings. There may be bolded words. There may be graphs and charts and pictures. Get a sense of how this book is laid out. And when you feel ready to actually start to read, you can start to even formulate some questions, which is the next step in this series of strategies. So you may wish to use some of the headings and turn some of those headings into a question format. That will prompt you as a reader to have a goal and to have a purpose for reading. When you get into a piece of text, you're then trying to answer your question. And so you're also priming yourself to act more like an investigative student or a researcher at that point, because you're looking to solve something or you're looking to attain additional information about something. And so questioning is a really good thing to do. And even if you're taking notes, another way of looking at this step is, instead of using the textbook to create questions, you may also want to jot down some notes as you read and either formulate in a question what you have read, so summarize and create a question, or you may want to jot down things that you still are wondering about. So you may want to actually write questions that you still have. So maybe you can take those to class. Maybe you can take a break and come back and try to read to answer your question, which means you need to read a little bit more deeply at that point. And so, of course, when you're reading, you want to focus on not reading your text all the way through from top to bottom and left to right, which is how we learn to read. Now you're looking for information, and at this point you already know how to read. And so don't get hung up on those beginning skills or beginner skills. So you want to read to answer questions. You want to read to learn more about specific topics. And you also want to add that other little bit there. You want to add the other bookend. So you have all of the content in the middle of your textbook. You have objectives at the beginning. You have a good little summary at the end, which is usually your little paragraph or two. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty, which is everything in the middle. But you don't need to do that all in one sitting, even at this point. So you may want to do that in advance of class, and then go to class, take some notes, and then come back and read more deeply according to what your professors are telling you, because not every single piece of information in a piece of text is important, and so you must get used to prioritizing the information according to importance or according to how well you know something or don't know something. And so it's good to consider which way you'd like to prioritize it, or using which set of criteria. Another thing that you may wish to do as you're reading is talk. So when we talk and look at something, we are activating different parts of our understanding, and we're processing in different ways. So we're taking that information, and when we're talking about it and we're looking at it, it's also less likely that we will lose our focus. So now we've done a survey, we've set some goals, we've asked some questions, we've read a little bit, we've pre-read perhaps, maybe we've even gone to class. We're talking now to read more deeply, and we're almost pondering out loud by doing so. And at this point, we would have used the material, but in little small pieces, quite a few different ways. And with all of that in place as a structure for reading, we're less likely to lose our focus, and we are more likely to have a deeper understanding of what we're reading. So at this point, you've done quite a few things. If you've gone through all of these steps, reading something in a textbook, then you want to leave it for a little bit, and you want to come back to it. Again, I like the questions, because if you've separated some questions from the text and you have those, you can almost begin to test yourself or self-test so that you can see if the information is actually sticking or if the information makes sense to you if you were to remove the book from your site at any particular point in time. Are you able, again, to speak or write about something in the textbook, not verbatim, but are you able to summarize things in your own words? Are you able to remember or recall what you read based on your questions or based on your class notes? An easier way to do that, which is our last step, is to actually ensure that you are trying to make some sort of connection to things that you already know. So for those of you that have completed your first year introductory psychology course, now if you're taking part 2, for example, you may want to try to recall what you've learned in part 1, and you're probably building on that information now in part 2. And so it's also a good reason not to give up your textbooks each term, because you can always go back. Remember that textbooks are not storybooks. They may have stories in them. They may have, pieces of novels in them. And although some of you are still reading novels, for those of you that particularly are in English, it's still okay to jump around because you're not reading for pleasure only. That might also be the case, but you're reading to critically analyze information, and so you must break it down. Analyzing means to break something down into its smaller parts so that later you can decide to do things with those little pieces of information. And so you might have some spoilers like I had mentioned, but keep reading in different ways, and sometimes it's okay just to jump right in. Jump right into the middle of a textbook and come back out. And at any point, if you notice that you're losing your focus, then it's time to stop and revisit your goal for reading. So always have a really good goal before you start to read. Now, there is a website that I won't show you tonight, but please take a look at it. It will also get you familiar with the parts of academic or peer-reviewed articles. And so just like the textbook typically has some standard parts, you may want to spend some time before you complete assignments this term and just simply get used to the little sections that are making up those larger articles. And also think about the hierarchy. Each section makes up an article, and a series of articles make up a journal. So keep that in mind as well. You're taking a little snippet out of a magazine, which is something we tend to forget, especially now that everything is digital. So don't forget to put things in context if you need to. So a scholarly article is one that is peer-reviewed, which means it goes through I think it's a fairly rigorous process by experts in a particular discipline. For you, you will have slightly different articles depending on the program. So nutrition articles and science articles may be similar in many regards. Again, you might have different pieces for those of you that are looking at historical articles or articles that speak about history. Psychology definitely has a different style to it, and a lot of times they're determined by their citation styles as well. So it is very worth your while just to go in, even tonight when you're looking at the articles that Denise might show you, see if you can pick out right away where the abstract is. Because the abstract is sort of like that little summary at the back of a textbook chapter. It's going to give you the big picture, so what's to come. And so it's going to prime you to make the transition into reading the entire article. And so luckily enough, that little summary in articles, they tend to sit right at the front, and they're called an abstract. After the abstract, you might want to also, again, consider making another bookend and going to the back. And so going to the conclusion, sometimes it's called the discussion, and go there and see what happens. What were the results of this particular piece of literature? What were they investigating? Notice some of the references at the end. What do they look like? What kind of citation style are they using? Is this something you're expected to use as well? When you try to connect the abstract and the conclusion, do they make sense to you? Do they actually give you a starting point, a reason for doing it? or reason why the study was conducted, and then again, what happened as a result. You might notice then it might make a little bit of sense to you to go back to the introduction. And this, because you're primed and you know it's coming, this will begin to fill in the details, and it is to your benefit if you can almost picture yourself as being one of the researchers who wrote the article. So picture yourself working with the participants. What do they look like? Where are they sitting? Are they in a lab? Are they in a classroom? Are they, are they in a natural setting? So those things really matter to helping you supporting your memory. So make some good educated guesses when it comes to that setting and introduction. And then go through and break up your main text or the main part of the article into smaller pieces. Don't use a highlighter, again, for a textbook or an article. Don't highlight mindlessly. If you're going to highlight, make sure that you're highlighting to break your text up, or you may want to highlight according to a particular code. So, for example, maybe everything yellow would have to do with the main argument that an author is giving in an article. Maybe in a textbook, everything you put in yellow is a main idea or a big idea. Maybe everything that is pink with your highlighter is everything that supports that main idea. So you can use that sort of approach whether you're reading an article or a textbook. And take a look at the numbers, take a look at the figures, take a look at the stats, see if you can understand them, but then also go through the text, look for that same information in a text format, and see if you can kind of broaden your understanding of that as you go through. Again, look at the graphs and the charts. They may show you things that you maybe had missed in the text. And notice all of the separate parts, all kind of before you go in and read. So using what you know about an article and knowing what your purpose is for completing an assignment or reading, only then should you really start to get in and read more deeply. So think of reading as layers. The first is like a get to know your setting kind of an activity. The next one is read a little bit in smaller pieces or smaller chunks, and then revisit your purpose for reading, and then go in and read more deeply. And often take breaks and think, am I still on track? What am I learning here? What is the most important information? Should I be writing something down in a note? For those of you that are note-taking as you read, it's a really great way to support your memory. A really simple way of knowing what kind of notes to take is to consider each of these pieces for your articles. It could be for textbooks, but this works really well for articles. So for example, what is the title of this article? What is it about? Why am I choosing to read it? Or why has my professor chosen it for me? Why was the study done? So you can think of the whys and the whats in different ways. Why was it important to conduct this study? What was missing from the previous studies or the previous reviews of literature? What was missing, and why are they moving forward to look at this? Who is completing it? Meaning who is the researcher, or who are the researchers? And who are the participants? What are they doing? And who will it benefit? And how might this information be used to help the public? How can I use this to enhance my understanding as a student at the Mount? When was this article written? When was the study conducted? For example, sometimes your professors might wish for you to look at more current articles. But in addition, there are times when they want you to look at some foundational studies, meaning, something that maybe was conducted or written in the 1950s or the 1970s or the 1990s, something that kind of was the foundation of everything since then. And sometimes they do get us to go back as students and read those things so that we can have an understanding of the whole timeline of how this field came to be, or a discipline came to be, and where did it happen? Where could be country, where could be, like I mentioned, the setting could be a clinical setting, it could be a classroom. So those are all important things to know, and important for you to take notes. And the other important thing to consider is, what is the main purpose of the writer? What is the author trying to show or prove or explore. What is the argument or the thesis of an article? That's really important as well. And take notes. So you can take notes in this format. You can take notes in a linear format. You can take notes on cue cards. You can write little notes on sticky notes and stick them all over an article. But find a method that's really, really clear and can keep you on track. So if you were to leave your article for 2 days and then come back to it, you should be able to pick up exactly what you were reading and understand and remember what you were reading a couple of days ago. If you are using articles to complete an assignment, I wouldn't recommend, however, leaving them for long periods of time. So you want that latent time to be short so you can facilitate that information moving from your short-term to your long-term memory. And you don't want to leave it too long because you may have to reread a lot if you do that. Oh, and I jumped ahead of myself. So generally speaking, you can use any kind of sticky note. For those of you who are not liking your own handwriting, you might want to download an app where you can record your voice. So you can use an audio, you can keep an audio file. You might want to use something like Drag and Dictate or text notes so that when you speak it records in a text format and then you can share it with yourself later. Funny enough, though, I attended a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and the researcher, he was researching students taking notes, and they found that students who take notes by hand tend to have a better time remembering the content that they are reading and trying to study. So keep that in mind as well. But again, it all depends on you and how you work. Create your references, do that right away. So I like to keep my references and get them there right from the beginning. It's easier for me to save them at the start than it is to scramble and try to find them at the end of writing. And for those of you that are attending our session later on this evening, you might want to attend our 6 o'clock session to learn a lot more about that. You can use your annotations, which are the little pieces and phrases that you write on the sides of your textbooks and articles, to help prompt your memory to recall what you had read previously. And you might want to use some sort of outline. So you may want to prepare an outline in advance, some sort of advance organizer, which I will get to in the next slide. And you might want to use some of the features that Denise will show you in a few minutes to have another way of documenting your annotations and little notes and questions. Again, you might want to plan something in advance. If you're not too sure what or how the information might come, something just like a mind map. This is not really a mind map, but something like this where you just start in the center of a page and you just write as you go. Mind maps look a lot more flowy than this one, but I can kind of go through that a little bit at another time. If you are trying to break things down and compare and contrast, or keep track of what you've read and what kind of keywords you might want to use for searching later, you can use a matrix or a chart. So consider what you're doing. So look at those assignments, go back to your syllabus every time you start something, and look for the assignment words. So if you're defining something, that would determine that you use a specific type of organizer. If you're analyzing something, it means you have to break it down. Maybe you'd have an organizer where you would keep things in a hierarchy. So you start with your main topic and you kind of go from there. So it takes a little bit of practice, but if you like visuals, you might want to consider using something like that, and it's your work, so you can adjust it as you go. You might make mistakes, and that's okay too, because when you make mistakes and fix them, while you're doing your work, that's great for your memory. That's great for learning, because really that is learning. And you may want to practice increasing your reading speed ever so slightly. Again, you don't want to read every single word. You don't need to. So skip all of the ahs, thas, tos, and just quickly look for keywords. So you can take a paragraph, identify keywords, and then contemplate those and whether or not you know them first. You can go back to that paragraph. You can maybe speak aloud a little bit. You could maybe formulate a question. Time yourself when you read a paragraph. Use your phone, use a watch, and then work on just ever so slightly increasing that reading speed. because you don't need to read every word, and don't get bogged down by those details. So push yourself along the text with your finger, use a ruler, just read a little tiny bit faster, and your comprehension may actually increase. Because when you read everything as a separate word, your comprehension can suffer because you might get distracted. So read to a pace that's really good for you and supports your understanding. And the minute you lose your focus, stop, reset that focus, and go in again. And also, you have a lot to read. So in university, you have a lot of content to read, and you have to read it very quickly. So you're going to get multiple articles, and for those of you that are in second, third, fourth year, you know this already. For any of you that are master's students, you know that the analyzing of multiple sources can happen at once, and so you really have to be efficient with taking notes, recording ideas, and then kind of annotating and jotting down and all of that stuff, resources, kind of all at once. So developing a good system early is really important. And get familiar with that language. So look for the words that kind of direct you as a reader. So things like, instead of saying the first, the second, and the third main points, in text you might see something like, initially, this is the most important thing, then, and then you might see something like, finally, and they basically mean first, second, and third. So use your highlighter if you're having difficulty identifying main points, and kind of just put a little dot or put a little color to identify those words to help you be more efficient with reading the text. And of course, look for those words that are difficult or easily confusable. There are some pieces of software out there as well that can help you identify those things with reading and writing. So for any of you that are curious about some assistive software as well, I know a little bit about that. So come and see me as a learning strategist, and you can learn more about that as well, and how to fit those tools into your workflow in a way that works well for you. Again, some of those signal words, some of these words mean that you have to speed up a little bit because something else is coming. Or hold on a second, slow down, because you have to think about this content because it might be different from what you were reading initially, or at least up until this point. And then, uh-oh, something's coming words, so therefore, consequently, in summary, you might find these at the end of paragraphs, at the end of sections, or at the end of an article, or even at the end of an abstract. So, phew, that's a lot for me. Overall, these are the things that we've covered this evening. But as always, any student, whether you're distance or you're on campus, it doesn't matter to me. We can meet online, we can meet in person. I'm in the bottom floor of EMF, which is the library, in 127F. At the end, when Denise is speaking, I will type in my contact information. I don't generally have many drop-in hours. I mainly do appointments, but I do have drop-in hours this term, even for distance students. So this Friday I have, it's a kind of a test, a drop-in session for my online students. So you can just drop right in from my website. So I'm going to hand it back over to Denise, and she's going to show you a few neat things. And these are things that you will use as a student at the Mount.
Thanks, Elaine. So, we've learned a lot about like reading, how to read, how to make notes, how to use this information. So I just want to take a few minutes to show you how to find these books and these journal articles, and then just to sort of connect a little bit of what Elaine was talking about with the books and journal articles that you'll be finding online, just so that you know from the library, when you find the information, what you should be doing and connecting with right away to make that whole process a lot easier. So just one second, I'm just going to share my screen with you. This usually takes a couple of seconds to make that happen. From the Mount homepage, you just want to click on Library. It's just right up at the top of the screen. And then at this point, you can type in of course you need to scroll down to be able to see the where to type it in. So where it says Novanet Discovery, this is a nice sort of general search that will find you both books and journal articles. So I'm just going to, we have been talking about note-taking. When you're off campus, or even when you're on campus and you've got your laptop, you will need to sign in. And although you can go as a guest, we advise you to sign in with the same login that you do for Moodle, because you get more information if you're a student. There are certain books and journal articles that we subscribe to, so that they're only available to marked students. They're not available to the general public. So to get the most information, you want to sign in. And now here, you can see even the first two, we've got like a book, and then the second one is an article. And you may be sort of wondering, okay, what's the difference between books and articles? In general, the articles tend to come first. So the researchers do their research. They want to try and get that information out quickly. They publish they get them peer reviewed. They get published. They get more feedback in. And then after a couple of years, then they publish the books on these topics. The books tend to have an introduction. They tend to have a much more larger view of things, different chapters describing different aspects, and the conclusion. So I find that the articles are good for sort of current and sort of a narrow focus. Books are good for an overview, an introduction, sort of the wide scope of a topic. And just because books, they tend to be a couple of hundred pages sometimes, don't think that, I don't have time to read a book. As Elaine was describing, you'll be jumping from, you can jump around between chapters. You can go to the introduction, you can go to the conclusion. So you just need to read a chapter in a book, and sometimes that can give you that introduction and overview that isn't present in the journal article. On the other hand, if you need current what's going on now, what are the results of sort of a research study, then articles are your friends. Great, so we've got them both here. If you want one more than the other, you can use the left-hand side here to narrow down. So you can see here, if I only wanted articles, I can say, okay, just give me the articles. And then we can see that we've got, you can take a quick look at the title here, just to see a little bit about, okay, what might be related to what I'm looking for. But when you look on details, often there's a description, and it usually comes from the abstract that gives you a bit more information here, but that's, okay, is it even worth me getting to the full text? And this will allow you to make some judgments about whether you want to go further or not. If you realize, yes, this is something I need to definitely read, we want to go across to the Find Online. And then once we go to the Find Online, we can click here to go to the actual journal article. So it's opening up a new window, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time to connect. On this page again, it's just the abstract that we saw before is going to be there. So just in case that abstract wasn't in the Novanet results, you can read it there. And then there's usually another button here to be able to download the PDF. And then we're just saying that we accept their conditions, which is usually, they don't want you to just copy and distribute. Remember, these are all special subscriptions that we get because we're at the university, so we want to use them for educational purposes. And then we've got the journal article. I know that sometimes scrolling does crazy things on your Blackboard Collaborate. So I'm just gonna to let it settle for a little bit. But then again, this is exactly the type of thing that Elaine was talking about. You've got your abstract at the bottom. Let's see if I can get to the bottom very quickly. Um, you have, well, more sometimes they include the surveys that they used. So you want to be able to take a quick look at the article. And you can see that we can do this quite quickly, even through the search, just to quickly determine if this is worth saving to go back to later. And from this screen here, of course, you can print or you can download. So I'm just going to go back to my results. And now we're just going to take a quick look at the books. So up at the top here, you can see it said refined by, and there's the resource type articles. I can get rid of that by clicking the little X. And then here, I can see all the different types. So, there's videos, there's all sorts of different things. I can say, okay, I just want to see books now. You can see here that we both have, you can find online access, so books that we have online, as well as we've got books in print at the library. For the books in print at the library, this is the number that you want to take note of. You can also find it if you click on Find in Library. And this is where you can find it on the shelf. And if you're not sure, just ask someone at the library. They'll be pleased to show you how to use this number to find it on the shelf. From here too, you can see what else is on the shelf. So often the books on the shelf are in particular subject areas. So there might be things that are close to this book that might be on your same topic, so that you can know what to expect once you find it. If this book is someone had borrowed it, you can also look to see if it's available at other libraries, and then you can always request it through document delivery to be delivered to you. The document delivery is quite quickly. It's usually about 3 days, plus or minus, and it's absolutely free. And even if you don't, you're not on campus all the time, maybe you live out in Bridgewater, you can order it to the community college that's in Bridgewater and pick it up there and return it there. Or maybe you live in Dartmouth, it's easier for you to get it at the community college in Dartmouth. You can order it to be picked up there for you and return it there too. With the online books, which are really good for our distant students, you can see that there's the Find Online. And then you want to be able to click on MSVU users, because again, we pay for these by subscription, so we only get the books that you'll see MSV users, because we paid for those for you. And of course, you paid for them through your course fees. Again, you've got the description there. To get to the full text, you just want to click on PDF full text. And I advise not downloading these. When you download the books, they, again, have a lot of copyright protection on them, so that you only get to keep them on your computer or a device for 1 week. And then they can no longer be read. And you need to have special software that it's free. You just download it extra. But you need to have these extra bits of software to read it. Whereas if you just read it online, you can quickly go to your chapters, and it's always available to you. The only time I download is if I'm going to be not where I have easy access to internet or Wi-Fi. If I'm on a data plan or something, then I download because of course that will be cheaper. But if I have access to free Wi-Fi and the internet, then I read online. And you can see here that all our ebooks have extra little sort of note-taking sort of features that you can, as Elaine said, if you want to just keep track of the main ideas, you can then use this note-taking to do that. With some of our books, you have to sort of create an account so that they can connect your notes to your account. So only you see the notes, no one else. So you do have to sort of sign in so that these online notes are tied to you specifically. But they allow you to actually do quite a bit and to organize and make sort of bookmark your main ideas that will be available to you at any time. So now I do want to give, I know we just have a few minutes, but I just want to see if you can do this yourself. If you can go to the Mount homepage, just type in maybe a topic that you're learning about in class and see if you can find a book or a journal article and connect to it. And just let me know once you've been able to do that, or if you haven't, please let us know where you got stuck along the way.
Okay, so now that you've done a little research and you learned how to find something in the library website, I hope you're feeling excited. Once you get a kind of a handle on all of this stuff, you'll start to get excited about doing your work, and it will be easier for you to do the work because you'll be quicker at doing it. So don't forget to not feel overwhelmed by everything we've given you this evening. Consider trying one small thing. So the next time you're looking to get ready to complete an assignment, go in and try to find an article. And if you can't find one, look at the keywords section, because maybe the keywords will give you a hint and help you to find an even better article. And so don't look at it as you needing to get in there and get it and come out. Explore, get ready to explore, but keep your criteria in mind, keep your objectives in mind, and use some strategies to be moving through the steps that you need to complete at a much more manageable pace. Don't hesitate to let us know if you have any questions. Again, Denise is with the library, and Elaine, that's me. I am the learning strategist on campus.